Good evening, Erev Tov, and Shalom. I want to welcome all of you to this evening, which is titled Remembering Together with Annemarie Yellin, who is sitting right here with me. My name is Zahava Dan. I'm a Jewish educator in the Bay Area, and I'm also an alum of Gvanim Leadership Program at the IAC. I will try to facilitate today's event. It's going to be a very moving one. And I want to start with a quote. Eli Wiesel wrote, "For the dead and the living, we must bear witness." Today on Yom HaShoah, we are witnessing, we are sharing, we are remembering, together with Annemarie, a Holocaust survivor, and with all Jewish communities around the world. First, I would like to acknowledge that even though it's so much better to hear testimonies like Annemarie's face-to-face, maybe in an intimate setting, we have one like that today. But we are fortunate that through Zoom and through the internet, Facebook, many more people can join us from all around the world. Today, Remembrance Day is sponsored, and we are grateful for the Israeli-American Council, the Consulate General of Israel to the Pacific Northwest San Francisco, and we are very grateful and thankful for Yasmin Lucas for giving us this beautiful surrounding, beautiful garden where we can host this event with Annemarie. So first, I would like to invite Consul General Shlomi Kaufman to say a few words to all of us.
Ava, thank you so much for this introduction, and I'm really honored to be at this event. Dear friends, the tragedy and the atrocities of the Holocaust are hard to understand and comprehend. Our obligation, the obligation of our generation, which still has the opportunity to meet and listen to survivors, is to continue and tell the story, not to forget. We have a moral obligation of passing the story to the next generations, the story of the Holocaust, the story of losing 6 million people, the story of atrocities. The Jewish people and the state of Israel are committed to this cause, to retell the story of the Holocaust for the generations to come, and never to make sure that we will never, and any people will never suffer again. Annemarie, thank you for being here with us. And thank you for helping us to fulfill our obligation.
Now I would like to introduce to you a very special guest speaker, Annemarie Yellin. Annemarie, we are so honored, we are so blessed that you are here with us, sharing face-to-face your story, your inspiring story. And we will ask you questions afterwards, but for right now, we really want to hear from you, your own words.
Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me to this beautiful surrounding, this event. I am a Holocaust survivor, but there are different survivors. I was not at a camp. I was the lucky one. I was hidden in a Catholic convent for 4 years in the outskirts of Brussels, Belgium. The convent was run by the sisters of Saint Antoine de Padoue, which is Saint Anthony of Padua. There were about 18 to 20 Jewish girls that they saved. So I'm a very, very lucky person because not only did they save my life, but I got an education. That's where I learned English, by the way. So I feel very blessed, and I have a big respect for Catholic convents because girls' schools, they had boys' schools, they were in boys' schools hidden. I was hidden in the outskirts for about 4 years. Well, anyway, my life didn't start that way. I was born in Chemnitz, Germany, which is East Germany, about an hour from Dresden. And I lived a very comfortable life. I had numerous toys. My parents owned a business and store. I had nothing to worry about until November 9th, 9:38, which is known in German as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. It was a Friday night, and the Germans were very smart. They knew Friday night was the beginning of the Sabbath, and Jewish people would be together. My mother would light the candles, my father would bless me, and we sat down to dinner. And all of a sudden, we lived in Chemnitz, in the main part of town, in an apartment building on the third floor. And all of a sudden, if you've ever been around where a bunch of glass breaks, it's very noisy. And I said to my parents, "But Papa, what's happening?" And he said, "Oh, it's nothing. They didn't want to scare me. They knew something wasn't right." Because there were a lot of Jewish businesses in that area. And the SS and Nazis came and broke the windows and plundered everything and took it away. How we finished the Sabbath, I can't remember. I went to bed, and about 4 o'clock the next morning, we heard this at the front of the apartment. And what was it? It was two SS officers. And I still see them with the black uniform, with the boots, and they stormed in. They took my father, and they didn't even give him a chance to put on a pair of pants. He was taken to the central police station, where today, when I went back to Chemnitz, they have a special memorial there for the Jewish men that were taken. They did not take women or children. Those days were just men. He was taken to the central police station, and the next day he was taken to a camp, which was then a political prison, Buchenwald. You've heard of it. It became an extermination camp. Buchenwald was mostly for political prisoners, for homosexuals, and for Jehovah's Witnesses. And I could never figure out why Jehovah's Witnesses, they're Christian, but they wouldn't do the Heil Hitler sign, and that's why they were taken. My father ended up in Buchenwald, and my family had a very dear friend who was a dentist, and he was Christian, but he didn't believe in Hitler. Not every German was for Hitler. And he took my mother someplace, I don't know where, but my mother obtained papers that we would be going to Santiago, Chile, because that was before the war. If you could prove you were leaving Germany, I lost my German citizenship. My parents did. We became what's called stateless. That means nobody can worry about you. You don't belong to any country. And my father was released I remember it was around Easter time or Passover. And my dad came home, which was around April, end of April. My father came home, and we had to leave Germany. Everything was taken from our apartment. My father collected books and paintings, and they took everything. Now, where do we go? United States? No, they weren't ready to take us. You had to have an affidavit. You had to wait for years. You had to have a sponsor, so you would not become a burden to Uncle Sam. Okay? So where did we go? We ended up going with the kid called Coyotes today, a smuggler. We went to Belgium because King Leopold and Queen Astrid said, "You come in, you'll never be a Belgian citizen, but we'll give you asylum." That's more than the United States did. So we left Chemnitz, and we had to travel to Cologne. That's like going from the East Coast here to the West Coast. We went by train with a little knapsack, like you call them backpack, a little knapsack on our back. We traveled silence on the train because they had a lot of German SS officer on that train. And we got to Cologne. So that's about an 8-hour train trip. We got to Cologne and the smuggler met us at the train station. But he didn't speak German like we spoke German. He had an accent. Well, later on, found out he was from Spain, from Madrid, and that's how he made a living, crossing people. And you had to pay him good money. Well, listen, he took chance. He could have been killed. So we got to Cologne, then he had a little car. He drove us to Aachen, which is the last German town. And we crossed the Ardennes forest. It's a big forest if you've ever been to Belgium. And we crossed that forest in the middle of the night. And trust me, silence was gold. You couldn't talk because the Germans knew this was happening. And if you were caught, you were shot right then and there. So would be the smuggler. Well, luckily we made it. We got into Malmedy, which is the first Belgian city, crossing from Aachen, which is German. And there was like a van. And we were put on this, well, a van, a truck, I can't exactly describe it, and taken to Brussels. And there was the American Joint Distribution Committee who greeted us at this little office and provided a room for us. I came where I had my own room. We had an apartment with a library, with a dining room, one room, Rue de la Caserne. I remember even the address. But that's okay. Freedom. Ladies and gentlemen, freedom is very important. We lived, it was like an attic, a mansarde, as they called it in French, with a hut, with a little hot plate to cook on. No kitchen, nothing, no bathroom. You had to go 3 flights down. Okay, it's freedom. Now it's September. School starts. I spoke German. I didn't speak French or Flemish. Brussels is mostly French. So I was made fun of by the kids. I was pointed, because I couldn't speak. But after a while, I learned French. When you're, that age, 11, 12, you learn a language very fast. I learned French. I made friends. This is 1939. Guess what? May of 1940, German invaded Belgium, France, Holland. Now we're back under German, situation. And the first thing that they did for us is every Jew had to wear this. And this is my original Star of David that my mother had to sew on. And I don't know, with all the things that I brought this with me. And I've taken schools and had some of the children wanted to touch it, to feel it. It was sewn on. Now, every time you walked out, you were scared. Because that's when they started taking people to camps. Okay? But there was a righteous young Belgian woman who was studying to be a social worker at the University of Brussels. And she went to the Catholic Archdiocese, which is the head of the Catholic religion, and said, Monsignor, we have to help these children. And consequently, she got in touch with boys' convent, for learning, boarding schools, sort of, and girls, because in those days, boys and girls were not in the same school in Catholic schools. So she placed me in this convent in Le Saint-Pierre, which is about an hour and a half from Brussels. It's a small village, with a convent called Couvent Saint Antoine de Padoue, which is Saint Anthony of Padua. It was a learning, it was like a 4-year course. And in that convent, Andre is her name, that hid us. She's still alive. She's 96 years old. And she's recognized in Israel, in Yad Vashem. She's on the wall of the righteous among nations. And she hid us. I was one of the children that was hidden in this convent, and I stayed there until liberation. But one day, night, or maybe 3 months before the liberation, a German officer came looking for British parachutists because the British were looking for land where to land in June. Okay? And she came to us the next morning and she said, "Girls, we have to put you in another place." This German listened to me when I said, "We are not hiding any parachutists." But the next German might have started looking. And you know, if you take a child, or I mean, we were children, we were about 14 years old then, and you keep interrogating, eventually they're going to say something. Not only would they have killed us Jewish girls, they would have killed some of the nuns as well, okay? So she placed us in different convents, and she says, "God willing, we shall meet again." And myself and one of the other gals that lives now in San Francisco, who was hidden with me, we were placed in a convent. Oh my God. It was a reform school, which we didn't know at the time. And not only were the nuns mean, but the kids were mean. But luckily, it didn't last long because we were liberated in 1944, September, by the British Army. And I was able to go back home. I never could remember, did my father come and get me? But I don't think so, because he didn't realize I wasn't in that convent anymore. I must have walked home to where they were hiding, okay, in this one room where they were living. And, you know, shortly thereafter, my mother had a cerebral hemorrhage and passed away. I guess all that tension. So she died at a very young age. And my father, through the Red Cross, got a hold of my mother's half-sister, who came to the United States many years ago in the 20s, and got a hold of her, and she sponsored me an affidavit. You had to have a sponsor, but it took about 2 years till I was able to come. This was almost 3 years. I came in 1947. I came through, everybody says that you come through Ellis Island. I said, no. Those days no longer existed. I'm strict. I left Brussels and I stopped in England because my sister, who was much older than I was at the time, went to England in June of 1938 as a domestic help. The British government brought young women in and also children, what they call the kinder transfer. I could have gone with that, but I cried. I didn't want to leave my parents, and they gave in. Afterwards, I regretted it. I could have gone to England as well. Anyway, my aunt sponsored me, and I came here. I left Brussels in May of 1947. Went from Brussels, I went to London to see my sister because she was living, she's passed away since, but she was living in London. She was married, and from London, I had to go to Liverpool to get the ship, which was the SS Mauritania, which is now, if you go to Washington, D.C., it's even, they have a picture of it because it brought in a lot of war brides. So I came here and I never spoke about it. Because my aunt, I guess she meant well. She said, "You're in America now. It's over. Nobody cares. Forget it." So consequently, I never spoke about it. my father followed me because you had to have affidavits and there was a different quota. Because I was under the German quota, he was under the Austrian quota. It wasn't that easy to come here. So, anyway, this is how I survived the Holocaust. And I never spoke about it because when I came here, my aunt said to me, Annemarie, and she still spoke perfect German, but I'll tell it to you in English. She said, "You're in America. Forget about what happened. Nobody cares." And she was right. That was the attitude. I didn't start speaking till 1991 because there was a group of people in New York City through the Distribution Committee decided to have a gathering of hidden children. They still meet every year. It's a different group. You know, a lot of us have passed away. I mean, the youngest survivors in their 80s, for God's sakes. So they started this organization, which was started in New York City in 1991. And our main speaker was Elie Wiesel. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, go out and tell the world so that it never happens again. He was the main speaker, and that's the first time I ever met him. And so I came back home, and I said, they want me to go and talk. And I said, no, I don't want to talk. And my husband, my late husband, said, no, you must go and talk. And consequently, I started because there is a Holocaust Speakers Bureau in San Francisco, and I started speaking. And I've spoken ever since. Of course, now it's all done through telephone or Zoom, but because there are things right now that are happening to people. Look at what happens to the Asian community. That was what they did to us. And we must not let it happen. Because people, how would I say, they live their little life and they don't think what is happening to your neighbor. I mean, even going back, what happened in Washington, D.C., when they broke all that glass and hurt people. When I saw that, I said, oh my God, that's Kristallnacht all over, right here in the United States of America. So we have to be very cautious right now and speak up because we live in very dangerous times. And like I said, this COVID kind of brought back memories because we're living right now in a very dangerous time because that illness is not to be dealing with lightly. When they say wear a mask, wear your mask. But to me, it's like living back in World War II without the bombs and without being worried to be sent to a camp. I had the privilege of traveling twice with students, with Rabbi Bachir, who you know, to Poland and to Israel. And when we got first to Poland, and when I walked into Auschwitz with 20 or 22 or 24 students, I said, for the grace of God, go I. Because when we walked and we saw the crematorium, we saw what's called a shower with gas. I mean, you suffocate, for God's sakes. And when I saw pictures of Dr. Mengele, what he did to the human race, I mean, there's pictures where he took two babies and attached them to see if they could live as one. Come on. And this was a scientist, a German doctor, for God's sakes. And nobody did anything about it. But the best part was then ending up in Israel, in Jerusalem. You know,
You told me that it felt like coming
home, absolutely. That's what I tell. It felt like coming home. And I had the fortunate experience to get together with with the son whose mother was hidden with me, mother passed away, and we're still in contact. He keeps sending me emails and asking, make sure I'm okay, and it's a wonderful relationship I have with, so I feel very blessed. But I've had my own Holocaust right here in the United States. I lost both of my children to illness. My son was a graduate of USF. He was bipolar and passed away in 93. My daughter passed away 2015. She had severe Crohn's disease, and they didn't have the medication that they have today. So I feel I'm wrapped in a today Holocaust, because cost is fire. It's a Greek word. Holo is to be embraced by fire. So I feel very angry some days. And I say, how can you, why? But there's no answer. So I try to put all my effort into my granddaughter and her beautiful family of 3 children. And I take one day at a time. And I say, today is today. It's a good day. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. And that's how I survive. I hope this answers some of the questions you might have.
We're encouraging people to put some questions in the chat. And I have some questions before we start, and maybe some people can answer here. You were showing your star. You showed me in the car also that you're carrying with you. And I wanted to ask you something. I read somewhere that you donated most of your memorabilia to the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And because when I asked you, do you have this or that, you said, no, I don't have them anymore. But you kept this.
Yes.
Why?
I don't know. That's a good question. That's the only thing I kept, because when the Holocaust Museum opened, my late husband and I went there, and we donated like false passports and very different things, because my cross that I wore, and everything. But I don't know why I kept this, because when we went to DC, I never even knew I was going to speak to students or to an audience,
Sorry.
Yeah,
So we have questions for you. That's why you hear the little beep here for you. And let's see some of the questions in a second. But before that, I remember that when you came to my house, and it was a few years ago, there were some people there. And one of them, when they heard your story of your family, that you were living in an attic,
Yes.
it right away reminded them of Anne Frank.
Yes.
And I remember that somebody brought this quote that Anne Frank wrote, and I have it here. So did it really feel like that for you, that despite everything, you believe that people are truly good at heart? Is that something that you feel that resonates with you, that you still feel that way?
I do. I still do. That there's good in everybody. It's just that they were mesmerized by Hitler, these people that did the bad things. But there's always some good people.
I have something here for you that already moves, and I don't know these people. So that's for you, Annemarie. Thank you for sharing. Somebody writes here, my grandfather, Michael Himmelfarb, I hope I'm saying right, was friends with your father. I'd like to hear more about those early years that in San Francisco. That's Dinah Stroy, and I know Dinah. Dinah know your family.
No.
Dinah Stroy. So her father was friends with your father.
Yes.
So I really want to know also, and I'm sure some people here, your father came to the United States,
Yes,
right?
my dad came. He was under a different quota, because you had to come. I was on the German quota. He was on the Austrian quota, because he was born in Lemberg, which became then Poland, Lviv. But Lemberg was the Austrian-Hungarian Empire. So he came.
How after you came?
2 years after me.
And you lived with him when he came?
Well, after I lived with my aunt on 28th Avenue in the Richmond district. And then once he came, we got our own apartment, and we lived actually in the Mission District on Guerrero and 19th, where there was also a synagogue.
Yes.
My dad used to go there for Shabbat.
I just passed by it the other
Still
week.
there?
The building is still there,
Yes.
and it has a Star
Star
of David.
David. Yes, that's where we lived. And then I met my husband in the Jewish Community Center in San Francisco, where most young Jewish gals met their husbands in those days. And we were married in 1950, and we bought a house. My husband was a serviceman. He was, in the Navy and World War II. And we bought a house in the Sunset. And in those days, you didn't have a down payment. You just made the closing costs. And that's where we lived. And I'm still living there on 39th Avenue. So these houses were built in 1950.
I want to go back to your childhood for a second, if that's okay.
Yes.
You said that you didn't go with your sister to England because you just cried and you couldn't stay separated from your parents. It was just too difficult. Then how did it feel for you when you had to leave then to go to the Covenant and live there?
Extremely difficult. I cried when I first entered the convent. I cried myself to sleep every night. It was very difficult. And you have to remember, those nuns were strict. I speak at a lot of Catholic schools, and the kids couldn't get away what they do now with what when we were in the convent. I mean, those nuns were strict, They didn't have, no is no. There's one sentence, one word, N-O.
And one more thing about childhood. I'm sure we have a lot more, and I'm going to open here, please. You were a Jewish family, and then you live with the nuns, and do you start believing differently in Jesus, in the cross?
I was enthralled with the Catholic religion. I converted to Catholicism. I had First Communion, which you saw the pictures. I loved it. I thought there was a lot of pomps and circumstance, and quite about 3 or 4 of us converted to Christianity. And I went to Mass every morning, and I was more Catholic than the Catholics.
So I would like to see if people that are here with us in this beautiful place have any question to you. And you can speak out loud so we can, and I will repeat the question if needed. Yes.
So when you were in the convent, and you said that you
Sorry.
become,
Yes. Speak louder. You can speak louder now. Yeah.
So in the time that you were in the convent, can you explain a little bit the feeling as a Jewish living a Christian Catholic in like a very strict place? How was it? How you
Adjust to it. How do you adjust to being?
I adjusted very easy. Some girls didn't. I did. I adjusted very easily because I was very enthralled with the Catholic religion, with the genuflecting, with the crossing, with listening to the priest, with listening to the music. I thought it was heaven on earth. Okay.
So I have another question here, and then we'll hear from you guys. So this is from Michal Ben Nun. She's saying first, thank you so much for sharing your family story with us. Can you please tell us more about how your parents were able to hide for so long and survive?
My father and mother, my mother unfortunately had a cerebral hemorrhage. So her mind, I don't think she fully realized what was happening. But my father was a true survivor. He was a true survivor. He said, if you can survive Buchenwald, you can survive anything. Because the atrocities he saw there, he said, it left something that you need to go on.
Thank you. Somebody wanted to ask you, and I'll repeat the question.
So it's a two-layer question. So one is piggyback on this, how did you find your way, or did you ever had thought of finding way back to Judaism?
How did you, so the question here is, how did you find your way back to Judaism from being in Catholic school? And the other one?
And that is, how do you make peace with the pain? I mean, as daughter of two survivors, what I've seen is definitely my dad could never make peace with the surviving part.
How do you make peace with really surviving also? Your parents, your father, how did you make peace with that he survived? How do you make peace with everything that you and your family went through? So we'll start with the first.
Well, I'm in the how I can say when you have to, you learn to accept and do the best you can. And as far, like I said before, I was young then. I didn't fully realize, but losing my children, I realized the terrible loss that began with the Holocaust, and living through it, it was another Holocaust. If any of you are parents, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, great pain for
Yes.
sure. There's another question here from Miriam. Again, she's saying, thank you, amazing woman. If you can please tell a little bit about how was your day-to-day life in the convent. Were you able to say to anyone that you're Jewish, for instance? Was there somebody that you can reveal who you really are?
Okay. There were about 20 Jewish girls, and we related to each other. We converted, and one of the girls, unfortunately, that we loved dearly, went home one weekend, and she never returned. And we found out why. She was picked up by the Gestapo in Brussels. And who denounced her was a Jewish man by the name of Jacques. And he denounced a lot of Jewish people because he worked with the Gestapo on Avenue Louise. But let me tell you, when the war ended, the Jewish underground finished him good. They took care of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone here has a question? Yes.
Maybe how do you talked earlier about the current times and how dangerous they are, and being a parent myself, I always think about what would have happened if this actually happens, these days. Do you think that there's a difference between if something would happen these days and back in the day with regards to maybe the stamina or the ability to survive? Was it something special about your generation that made it capable of surviving?
So the question here really, and I want to do it for people who cannot hear, is as a parent, is really trying to think how would it would have been for him to go through this. He has children, young children, and can imagine to go and survive such hard and difficult situation that you are all part of. And the question really is, did you feel that your generation was really capable more than our generation to handle such a thing, or was it something that, as you said before, you just have to adapt?
Well, I think this new generation today, they don't know what it is to go without. We had to learn at an early age to go without, to go with our identity, to be pretending you were Christians, or to convert to Christianity, because today, I mean, it's just kind of when they told people don't go out in group, like in Florida at the beach and stuff, they didn't listen. If we were told you have to keep your mouth shut and you have to stay in the room, we did. That's the difference today. When we were told, be careful, we are careful. We were careful because it was a matter of life or death. And it's the same today with this COVID. If they tell these young people, don't mix, don't go out there screaming, hollering without your mask, they're not listening because they've never had to. They've always had a very, easy life, easy peasy here. They don't know. And what's happening today is starting to sound to me like what happened in 1938, 1933 when he came to power, What they did, what the cop did to that Floyd was inexcusable. Even if he had stolen or had a phony dollar bill, for God's sakes, pick him up, take him to the Central Police Station. Hate, hate, hate. What they're doing to the Asian community in San Francisco and in Oakland, that's what they did to the Jews, for God's sakes. And I always respect the Asian community because Shanghai, China, took all those German and Austrian Jews and kept them. My uncle, my aunt were one of them. I have at home one of the students that comes to the house, which is the next chapter, it's called. Her mother is adopted a child from China, and they went to Shanghai, and she visited it because they have a regular museum in Shanghai for the German and Austrian Jews that went there. And she brought to me, it doesn't mean nothing to her, but she gave it to me as a little red book which has all the names of the Jewish community in Shanghai during World War II. And I found my uncle and his wife there. My goodness, she said it don't mean nothing to her. And I should have brought the little book. It's really a very nice. So China really helped the Jewish people. Roosevelt didn't do anything. We had to wait 4 years for the affidavit from my aunt, for God's sakes. You had to prove you were not, because that was the McCarthy era, we had to prove we were not communists, for God's sakes. So America has a lot to learn as far as acceptance. And when I speak to students, I always end my speech with one word: acceptance. Even if you don't like it, but accept people. We're all God's children. So,
Wow, I think we're almost towards the end. I want to see if we got another question for you. And if anyone here, yes, please.
Your life was not easy during the war, after, and even once you got to a safe place. If you were to define yourself in one word, what would it be?
So how would you define yourself? Your life, and this is for people who are not here. Your life was not easy. You had the Holocaust. You survived a lot of things, and you came here and you had your own personal Holocaust with your children.
Yes.
How would you define yourself in one word? A few words.
I feel God put me on earth for something. And I think I like to teach people to accept the things we cannot change and change the things that we can. And I'm very blessed. I have my daughter gave me a beautiful granddaughter who has 3 beautiful children. And I thank God every day. Yes, I have something to be thankful for. And life is not always easy, but we must do the best. And I'm the word survivor. Every morning I get up and I take care of myself and I say, thank you, God, I'm alive. And that's all I can say. Thank you so much for all your beautiful
Annemarie,
questions.
I remember last time we were together with other people.
Yes.
Because it was before Corona, and
Yeah.
it was in my house. We did Zikaron Basalon, and I didn't know you. And you walk into the house. The other Holocaust survivor was sick, and Victoria brought you.
Yes.
She said, I have a friend. Can she share her story?" And I want to tell you that from that day on, you are always in my heart.
Thank you.
And I have a feeling now that I'm echoing a lot of sentiment that is in the people here, and I'm sure people who watch us now who feel the same way, that you are. And you told me, I don't have a story of a Holocaust. I don't have a story of survival. My story is tiny one. Well, we are looking for the personal, for the stories of people and their experiences and what they really felt inside, and how, despite it all, we all have lots of things that you had more than anybody's share. And I remember, so after you spoke with everyone and everybody wanted to talk to you, you got up and there was music in the room. And you came to me and you said, "You're from Israel. I love Jerusalem. I
Yes.
want to go again. Will you dance with me with this music?"
Yes.
And for me, answering your question about what really defines you is your joie de vivre.
Joie de vivre. I do
Really
have
the
that.
joy of life, of every day. And you said to me, I wake up every morning, I say thank you that I'm alive and I'm able to take care of myself.
Yes.
And I can be with people I love. And I
Yes.
think we all feel that with you. We feel that. We
Thank
feel that
you.
joy, and we feel blessed and honored to be here with you and to hear from you. And I hope that for many more years we'll be able to sit and hear from you.
Thank you so much. I feel blessed, really, that you have me in your life and you wanted me to share the story, because, especially now, because we are living in sort of a quarantine. We can't do what we want to do. We can't go to a symphony. We can't go to a play. We can't go to an opera. We're back, like I said to you in the car. It's like being back in World War II without the bombs coming down and without worrying. You're going to be taken to a camp, and camp is kill.
So we started with Eli Wiesel. I didn't know you met him.
Yes.
And I want to thank him wherever he is right now. His wonderful spirit.
Yes.
I
He,
want to thank him for encouraging you and so many others
others, right.
to tell your story.
That's right.
Regardless of small or big, it's a story that we all need to hear and we all need to remember.
That's
So
right.
thank you,
Thank,
Annemarie.
thank
People
you.
who are here with us, and thanks everyone who is watching us right now.
Oh,
Who I'm sure was inspired and touched, and these stories will stay with us. And I'm promising you that we will pass it on to the next generation, and all the wonderful parents that are
yes,
here will
yes.
hold it in their hearts and will keep telling the story.
Thank
again
you,
and again.
thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Tודה
And
רבה,
like I
everyone.
said, peace, shalom,
Shalom.
shalom,
Shalom.
peace for everybody, and back to a normal life.
Amen. Amen to that.